The Ford Explorer gets a refresh for the 2025 model year, and in this video I'm going to cover the exterior changes, the interior changes, take it for a drive and see what it's like out on the road, as well as talking about the kind of fuel economy you can expect, and also the pricing and how it compares to the competition. And so, as far as the styling changes, well, this is the ST version we have here, but all Explorers get basically the same changes here. You just have the sportier flair of the ST here, and you can also get the sportier look of the ST line if you don't need all the performance of the ST. But anyway, as far as the changes up front there, you will see there's new headlights there that are a little larger than before and a little more stylistic. You also have a larger front grille, a much larger grille. That's, I think, the biggest change that stands out. And of course, a new front bumper to go along with that. And still like having the Explorer script written out on the front of the hood there. And otherwise, coming down to the sides here, the ST gets some new wheels, and that's a nice little change here. You get 21s only on the ST. Everything else gets 20s or smaller. Another new option for 2025 is the option for a black roof, but it is an expensive option. It costs $4,895, nearly $5 grand for a black roof. I think you might be better off just wrapping it yourself for a fraction of the cost. Yes, if you want a black painted roof from the factory, that is now available here to really let everyone know that's in the know that you have the extra money to drop on that for your ST to stand out from the pack. Otherwise, though, going out to the back there, you're going to see you get some new taillights that now have a little bit that extends into the actual tailgate there itself. You also have a slightly redesigned tailgate overall as well, and a new rear bumper that is, again, just tweaked ever so slightly. You still have those pronounced quad exhaust tips that look great. And so yeah, overall, it's a really nice look here on the outside. There's also BlueCruise as standard on everything except the lowest active trim now, which is a nice thing I'll talk about in a little bit here. But some even bigger changes, I think, happened on the inside. So let's check that out. Yeah, so the interior of the Explorer is a nice improvement here for 2025. They got rid of the big vertical touchscreen and some of the cheaper materials, and now we have some nicer materials, even a few fun Easter eggs, and this more traditional horizontal screen. And it's a really nice redo up front here, and I wasn't crazy about the pre-refresh interior for the Explorer here, but this is actually a really nice place to be. So anyway, first thing, sitting down in these seats, you have these seats that have this myco suede-like material, they call it, and this is also the active contour seat. So it's the massaging seat that you have here as an option in the ST. I believe it's something you can also get in the Platinums as well. But really a nice seat, and I did a lot of highway driving, over about 550 miles of highway driving in this vehicle this week. These seats with the massage are really nice. There's a few different massage programs to it, and just a really well done seat. They're also heated and ventilated, of course, as well. And the Alcantara also, is a pretty nice feeling material. But it is worth noting, for the same price as this ST, you can get a Platinum with a much more plush interior. I'll talk more about how the trims compare later on, but still really great seats nonetheless here. Moving on to the steering wheel, you have a little bit of a flat bottom here on the ST and a little bit of a thicker wheel too. Nice big 10 and 2 notches, but a good 9 and 3 grip. Just a few basic buttons here on it, and it is also a heated wheel here in the ST, and you also get paddle shifters here in only the ST version of the Explorer, and nice to have those. Now moving on to the gauge cluster here, that is another new thing here. So the graphics are new. It's still kind of the same size. It's a 12.3 inch digital gauge cluster here, and a really nice look to it. You can customize it as a few different views, and this is typical Ford stuff, the same gauge cluster we see in an F-150 and many other Fords over the past several years. So nothing new there. If you're familiar with Ford products, you'll feel right at home with that gauge cluster, and a really high resolution though, and really enjoy that. I do wish there was like an ST pages where you could have like boost gauge and things. You don't really have any of that, but otherwise still really nice. Now moving on to the middle of the dashboard here, again, the big new thing is this 13.2 inch touchscreen. It's also running the Android Automotive operating system. Thankfully, you still do have wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto as well, but you also now have the Google Play Store, and you can have apps run natively here. So you can have YouTube downloaded, you can have whatever apps you want from the Play Store and have them run natively. If you don't want to tether your phone to the car for whatever reason, you have that built in there. And otherwise, it's pretty simple and basic. There's not a whole lot of little menu icons on the left there. It really just always defaults to CarPlay. But you have the big menu page where you can go and pull up the various different things that you want to do. If you want to do satellite radio, whatever, that's all nice in there and very easy to use, and a really well done, infotainment system in my opinion. Now, the only thing is, you have to use the infotainment system for your HVAC controls now. There are no climate control knobs or any climate control buttons or anything here. They got rid of all of it. And, you know, that's a cost-cutting thing, but it does open up this area, which I'll talk about in a second. And as far as these on-screen controls, they're very well done. So that bar at the bottom is permanent. You always have climate controls there, even when you're running CarPlay and things like that. And, you know, it's only 2 taps to turn on your heated steering wheel. Not a big deal. And yes, it's maybe a little more distracting than a button that you can have muscle memory with, but, you know, still pretty easy to find all those controls. And I do like this little ridge you have of nice, like, knurled plastic. Looks like metal, but I believe that's just plastic. But anyway, you know, it's a nice looking and feeling material and nice little way to stabilize your finger there. And then moving down, though, you do still have a volume knob, which is appreciated. And then just a few basic buttons. I do appreciate, though, like the quick access button there to the 360 camera, which is a nice 360 camera, by the way, has a variety of different views you can look at there. And, you know, just all well done. But I really do like this shelf. It's really, you know, nice and high, nice and convenient. You don't have to reach for your stuff like other vehicles, the way they have their shelves configured. And so you have a wireless charging pad here on the left and these, you know, upper trims, and then just another open space there on the right. Would be a good opportunity to do double wireless charging pads. We're starting to see that in some other vehicles. Also, this B&O Play stereo with this sound bar kind of design is a very cool touch. That's something they borrowed from the Mach-E originally. And this B&O stereo is also a really nice stereo. In these top trims, it's going to be a 14 speaker, 980 watt stereo, and it sounds really good. I did a lot of, you know, music listening here this week, and it's just, yeah, a very good sounding stereo. I'd say it's slightly better than many others in this mainstream segment as well. And you also get a 10 speaker stereo that is still B&O branded for some lower trims of the Explorer, and then the base Explorer gets a 6 speaker system. But yeah, really impressed with this stereo. I think they did a really good job on that. Now, moving down to the other center console area, this has all been redesigned as well. And you have some nice soft padding down by your knees now, which I really appreciate. Not everyone does this in this segment. Very few do, honestly. And I think it's really nice, especially when you're blue cruising a lot, you know, resting your knee up against here when you got your cruise control on. Really nice. I enjoyed that here over my many highway miles as well. But also coming down, you also have this tray that opens up here, and you will see another little cubby in there. It's actually pretty deep with a USB-A and USB-C jack and a regular power outlet. Your 2 cup holders here next to your shifter and drive mode selector, and another little cubby behind that. And then you also have the center armrest, which is nice and softly padded. You open that up and you will see a nice big bin in there with 2 USB-C jacks. And I'm happy they got rid of there was a little like removable tray. There's still a little notch here for it. I'm not sure where it went, but I remember in my original Explorer ST review, like I could almost cut my finger on that plastic. It was so sharp. Thankfully, all the plastic here in this is nice and rounded off and no sharp edges, and so a nice improvement there too. We also have nice large pockets down here in the doors as well, and there's also another little bonus pocket here on the passenger side that has a fun little motif of Explorers driving along there, you know, to fit some very small items, but, you know, nice little extra storage spaces nonetheless. Moving on to the back seat here in the Explorer ST. So here for the ST, you only get a 6-seater setup with those captain's chairs. There's no way to get a bench in the middle. Other versions of the Explorer, you can get a bench there in the middle, but not here in the ST, so just be aware of that. Only seats 6. Now, as far as that second row, it's a very nice seat. Of course, you know, it has the same materials there. And there are heated seats back there for that second row, but it is worth noting that some of the other competitors do offer ventilated seats for that second row at this price level as well. So, you know, Grand Highlander Hybrid Max and Mazda CX-90 Turbo S in particular, both will give you that around the same price tag or even a little bit less. Again, I'll talk more about pricing later, but yeah, just know you can get a nicer back seat in others if you want, but still, you know, plenty fine. I do also have to say, though, that, you know, me being 5'9", sitting behind myself back there in the second row, I have, you know, a few inches of legroom to spare, but I feel like most of the other competitors will give you a little bit more space as far as legroom goes. So just keep that in mind. Now, otherwise, though, they do have their own little climate controls back there, and even have some sunshades there that are manual you can pull up. And I also like how you have like the, you know, pockets in the doors with a cup holder, nice and high. That's great for kids. And then you also have the lower pockets there as well. And also a nice large pass through the middle if you don't want to pop up that seat. But if you do want want to pop it up, it's just a lever. It's, going to take a little bit of muscle, so the smallest of kids probably won't be able to do it, but, should be fine for anyone else, and you pop back there, and you'll see that it's not as large of a third row as some of the best in this segment. I'd say it's roughly on par with, again, that CX-90. I think it'll be probably a little bit more than like a Durango, for example, but that's another area where Toyota Grand Highlander is going to have a lot more space, be the best. But honestly, some people were giving the Explorer third row like, a really bad review, saying it's like small and uncomfortable. But I mean, again, I'm 5'9" and I fit back there. Like, my knees are basically right up against the seat back with that second row slid all the way back as far as it'll go. But I fit. It is usable for adults, not for a long road trip for adults, but you could fit adults back there. It is certainly more than just a little kid back seat, in my opinion. You also will see a decent amount of headroom too, which is why I think this is actually more well suited for adults than a lot of people give it credit for. Now, you also have pockets in the doors, but if you are on a longer trip, the coveted seat's going to be the one on the passenger side, because they get 2 USB-C jacks and an extra little cubby there that you don't get on the driver's side for some reason. So just be aware of that. There may be a dispute as far as who gets the best seat in the third row there. But otherwise, a really good amount of space, I think. And yeah, I was just kind of surprised against just how good it is. You also have this really nice large panoramic moonroof here as part of this sun and sound package that this one has for $3,000. And so really nice. You have a nice large panoramic roof though that does also open up here for the front. Lastly, the cargo space here in the Explorer is a good amount of space. Obviously, with the third row up, you're going to have a little bit less, but I'd say that's about on par with what you get with most other, 3-row vehicles in this segment with the third row up. Again, Grand Highlander might have a little bit more because that is, I think, really the biggest and most family friendly of the bunch, but this still is good space. You also have a nice amount of extra bonus space under the floor there. And those seats, if you do want more space, do power fold, and you'll see a power outlet back there as well. But let's start up and go for a drive. The Explorer ST does have a nice, unique ST key, which is an appreciated extra little touch, but otherwise, the standard Ford key, which is a little bit of a larger key, but, a nice key nonetheless. And of course, it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off here in the Explorer ST. So the first thing you notice about it, I think the first thing that I've noticed is how high you sit up in this vehicle. And if you're buying this because you want a sporty experience, I just kept wishing the seat would get lower, because you do feel like you're kind of sitting on top of it still. The dash is very low, and that's nice for visibility, but I just always kept wishing, if this is a sportier mindset with the ST, to be a little bit lower. I have it as low as it'll go, and it just feels a little high. Other than that, visibility is very great. Again, dash falls nice and low. Even this big screen doesn't really come up, too high or anything. You have pretty thin A-pillars, which is great, and nice large side mirrors. View out of the back is really good too, as long as you don't have those third row headrests up. But I am kind of surprised we don't have the option for a camera rear view mirror. That's something that many others in this segment do offer, and it'd be nice to see that added here eventually, but no such luck so far. Other things though about the ST version, so you do have a Sport Tune suspension, that is unique to the other Explorers, and it's been totally fine though. I think the real beauty of the Explorer ST, and the reason why they sell so many STs, is that they didn't go too far with the sporty thing. And I think some people would argue they didn't go far enough, but I think, it definitely means that you have a smooth ride. Now, there are no adaptive dampers or any other fancy suspension stuff. It's just, all passive. But you feel a little bit of the road, the bumps and stuff. But I mean, again, I've put basically 600 miles on this thing this week. No complaints with the ride quality. It's going to be really great for a family cruiser, great out on the highway and all that. And other things here. So you have a pretty nice responsive throttle. Brakes also have a nice bit of dead travel before they start to bite, so they're not too grabby or anything, and they're really well calibrated with that. And I'm also happy to report that this 10-speed automatic has been really well behaved this week. It's been in the right gear. It hasn't gear hunted too much. It's been pretty responsive, at least in my more casual driving, and it's pretty good. And that's a notable improvement, because this 10-speed in other Ford products has annoyed me in the past, and I'm really happy that at least for the Explorer here, it seems like they've nailed the tuning, at least again for the usual kind of driving most people do. Other things I've noticed, it's nice and quiet in the Explorer as well. This is actually a little bit of a windier day, but you don't really hear much of the wind noise. You do get a nice little burble from the exhaust, you can really tell, it feels a little sportier just by that exhaust alone. I do really appreciate that. But we're going to go ahead and put it up into the sport mode that it has, which gives us, the quicker throttle response, heavier steering, all that usual stuff. Let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it accelerates. Here we go. There we go. Wow, and you get that really nice loud sound from that 3-liter twin-turbo V6 engine we have here. And in the STs, it does 400 horsepower, 415 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 is 5.1 seconds, which is notable for a vehicle that's, these are like 4,800 pounds almost. So, a good amount of grunt and a good amount of acceleration. Obviously, there is an aftermarket too. If you want more power, that is something that, you are able to do. But this is nice and punchy. I'm actually, pretty impressed with that. I wish there was a little bit of a quicker response there whenever I floored it. It took it a second to figure out what gear it wanted to be in before it gave me, that acceleration response. But once it finally decided that, it did go up and get going very nicely. And when you put your foot down now, pretty nice responsive there. Just again, one downshift and then boom, you're ready to go. And man, yeah, it lifts up the nose there and really feels nice and punchy. And I think that's one of the things I've appreciated the most this week about the Explorer ST is the amount of punch. And this is more punch than everything else on paper that this competes with. So that is, a nice notable thing, as it is, going to be the horsepower king here. But I just put it into the manual mode because we do have the paddle shifters here in the ST. Let's try out some manual shifts here. It's actually very good. The 10-speed is pretty good because, again, this is the same transmission they use in Mustang GTs and all that kind of stuff, so it has to be pretty sporty. I'm glad, though, that they retained these same kind of shift speeds and times for this. So, yeah, it's very good. These paddle shifts are just plastic, but, I'm just glad they work really well and pretty happy with that. So, pleasantly surprised. I think those are the things that do really stand out because you look at, manual shifting and, the other competitors. Durango's good, but the others, not so much. So, anyway, come up some corners here. Let's see how the Explorer ST handles. So we just have these Pirelli Scorpion all-season tires here, and they grip really well, though. And again, I think me sitting up so high, it does feel like it has a little bit of a higher center of gravity than some of the others. But this is, a really great rear-wheel drive-based platform. And it does power out of corners very nicely. And actually, you can get the ST with rear-wheel drive still. All-wheel drive is a $2,000 option. And so if you live in a place that, you don't need the all-wheel drive, the rear-wheel drive one's probably really fun. You get the same 400 horsepower all going to the back there. I'd love to try one of those someday. I don't know how many of those they actually make. I feel like most of these probably have all-wheel drive, but really great. You can get these with rear-wheel drive. Yeah, so, it doesn't love turning in. It doesn't feel super agile. It does it, though. It's flat, I'd say. Again, even though I am kind of feeling like I have a higher center of gravity, it does do a pretty good job. This isn't the kind of vehicle, though, that really feels like it wants to be pushed on a back road. It'll do it, but obviously this is where kind of the debate came into play with this having an ST badge. STs in the past, we're talking the Fiesta, the Focus, obviously very small, light, very nimble vehicles. And, I still think Ford Explorer Sport would have been a more appropriate name for this because, it's got great power, but, it doesn't really, fulfill its mission of being a great, handler like you would expect from the ST badge. It's fine, though. Now, I will say, there are a couple others with rear-wheel drive-based platforms. There is Durango. I'd say Durango probably handles it even a little bit worse than this, so I think that is certainly appreciated. But really, the one these days that gives this a run for its money is the Mazda CX-90 Turbo S. That has a little less horsepower, but it's getting it from an inline turbocharged 6-cylinder engine, and it's a rear-wheel drive-based platform with that Mazda. And I pushed that a lot on a lot of windy back roads in Northern California. Then I had them for a week and pushed them on my own roads around here, and that just feels more dynamic. It feels better balanced. It feels it feels like a premium platform, which is what they're going for. But it feels like you're driving, an X5 or something like that. This, again, I appreciate this rear-wheel drive base, but it just still feels you know, like it's really focused on the comfort thing first and foremost. And so is the Mazda, but the Mazda still feels better when it's pushed than this does, even though the Mazda still has just as comfortable of a ride. I'd argue even maybe a slightly more comfortable ride. So I think Mazda's mastered this idea that you can have your cake and eat it too. And, you know, again, this is fine. It depends, you know, if you're driving on tight, windy roads like I do, you know, you might be a little disappointed. Maybe the Mazda would be a better choice, but, you know, for the average person on, you know, normal straight kind of roads, you just want all that power, you know, you can get that. Now, it is worth noting, though, if you do like this extra power, you can also get that in the Explorer Platinum. And so if, you know, since this isn't really that dynamic of a handler, personally, I just go for the, you know, the bigger motor, and then go for, you know, the Platinum for the smoother ride, the nicer interior. The ST is cool. I'm glad they offer it. But, you know, if it were my money, I think I'd probably go for that Platinum for the same money. I feel like I'm getting a nicer interior, better value there. Now, and also, if you don't care about power and performance, you can also, in the lower versions of the Explorer, get the 2.3 liter, 300 horsepower 4-cylinder. That's this motor comes standard in these. And if you, again, like the sportier look, but you don't need 400 horsepower, you can get the ST line version of this with that, you know, 300 horsepower motor instead, and save yourself some money there. But I do like the way this motor sounds. It has been nice to listen to that little, you know, burly sound all week. But so now we are merging onto the highway here in the Explorer ST, and this is where, again, I had a lot of impressions because I got to do, again, over 500 miles of BlueCruise. Now this one is equipped with BlueCruise 1.2. Now since then they've done 1.3, which stays engaged for a longer period of time. There's also 1.4, which does you know, better engagement as well. And then there's even 1.5, which will eventually do hands-free lane changes. That's just on the absolute newest of stuff. We don't have that here on most of the Ford lineup yet, but that will be something that comes eventually. But we do have BlueCruise enabled here, and so I am hands-free. And this is really huge because nothing else in this segment does hands-free. And I will say right off the bat, it's not as good as Super Cruise. And you can get Super Cruise and some of the other stuff in GM, like there's the Acadia that this kind of competes with, but nothing that's sporty. And so if you're watching this ST review, I'm assuming you want something sporty. And Mazda does nothing close to this as far as hands-free stuff. And also, you know, you don't get anything from Dodge for sure with that very old Durango. And also Toyota Highlander, Grand Highlander, you know, doesn't have anything at highway speeds. It'll do some low-speed hands-free stuff under 25 miles per hour, but nothing hands-free like this. And so on the highway, over 500 miles, here's my thoughts on BlueCruise 1.2 in the Explorer, the way it's implemented. It's pretty good. I would say over 50% of the time on the highway it was engaged. I'd even say maybe even close to 75% of the time. Very good, you know, certainly better than having to have my hands on the wheel the whole time. And from a road tripper standpoint, this is hands down the king. This is the way to do it for sure. Now, as far as some of the little complaints, though, I do appreciate that 1.2 will move over if there's other cars, you know, passing you or whatever, to give you a little bit more space, and, you know, it's a little more natural. But okay, now it's asking me to put my hands on the wheel. I'm not sure why. It's a clear day, clear road markings. It does like to have you take over on the tighter corners. I don't think this is that tight, and again, Super Cruise has no problem on this, so I'm not sure why, you know, it's asking for my hands here. But, you know, so this is where I'm kind of illustrating here. It does kind of have this back and forth you have to, you know, keep tabs on, and, you know, but it is, you know, still nice to have. Now, the other little complaints that I have with it is that the lane change that you do here in 1.2, you have to use the turn signal, and you can still be hands-free, but the turn signal is required by you in order to, you know, get that lane change executed. And it's really slow with doing the lane changes. You have to, you know, hit it, and then it takes a second or two, and then finally starts to move over. It's very slow and unnatural feeling with the lane changes, and if someone's following behind you, they'll be like, man, why is that guy taking forever to, like, change lanes? So it could use some work. And also, even just in, like, when I manually took over and did my own lane changes while still letting the adaptive cruise system function, it still was far too slow before it starts applying the power. Some of the best adaptive cruise systems, when you start getting over into the other lane, it immediately starts to ramp up power as you are moving over. This, it doesn't do that. We're back to hands-free now. This, you have to, like, sit, and I was hanging out in the left lane for like 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's like, oh, okay, now we'll start doing the actual pass. Again, just not natural. So I found myself, especially if I wasn't in the hands-free mode, just being like, all right, well, forget this. I'm just going to go all manual again and just do everything myself, because I was getting frustrated. Another frustrating thing about BlueCruise is that it, at least with my eyes, is very easily confused in thinking that I'm not paying attention. Especially the big Achilles heel of this thing is wearing sunglasses, and maybe it's because they're polarized sunglasses, I don't know, but polarized sunglasses with direct sun blasting on my face. It would scold me forever and say, you know, pay attention to the road, pay attention to the road. And I would be jiggling the wheel, being like, look, I'm steering, I'm paying attention, and I'm looking for it, and it still would be ding, 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 ding. And sometimes it would do it for, you know, 3 or 4 seconds. Other times it'd be like almost 10 seconds of like, what are you doing? Pay attention to the road. And I'm like, I am. And so it drove me nuts. And so that's something that I didn't love for sure. You know, these are all things that, you know, will be improved and stuff, but things that, you know, it's been a little while since I've done a longer Super Cruise drive, but things I haven't encountered with Super Cruise. So BlueCruise is still a solid second place in my opinion, better than everything else except Super Cruise, but Super Cruise is still easily far and away the better system. And again, you can't get anything Sporty from GM in this segment if you know, want Super Cruise, but, you know, it's just worth noting, if you don't care about the Sporty thing, you know, Acadia, for example, Buick Envision, all those have Super Cruise, and also that Super Cruise is able to do some hands-free driving even on rural roads and other roads that aren't divided highways now. So Super Cruise is even expanding beyond highways. So really, you know, a more impressive system than this. But again, I'm happy we have it. And the nice thing too is they lowered the pricing for BlueCruise last year, so now you can have it as a one-time thing for the life of the vehicle for like $2,500. You can have it on a yearly basis for $495, and then it's $50 a month if you just want it on a monthly basis. And I really love that adjustability, because that means, you know, if you're fine to drive yourself most of the time, but you want to have the hands-free thing for a road trip, you know, you do the monthly thing, you pay $50, and for your long highway drive to the beach or whatever you're doing, it'll be hands-free, and then you can unsubscribe after that. And I really like, you know, that. I think, you know, if you're doing some long highway road trip or something, $50 totally worth spending for, you know, 1 month of this. The more expensive stuff, you know, it's going to come down to, again, how much you're going to use. If you sit in grueling traffic every day and you want to do that hands-free, I could see, you know, the annual subscription, you know, potentially being worth it. But just keep in mind, you only get a 90-day free trial of BlueCruise. After that, you do have to pay, you know, for it, you know, on whatever terms you want there. But otherwise, though, as far as safety tech here in the Explorer ST, it has everything as standard, again, because these are the top trims here, the ST and the Platinum. And so that means you get like 360 camera, even as standard. You get, you know, of course, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, evasive steer assist, even automatic rear braking, and you know, all the other usual stuff, automatic emergency braking in the front, adaptive cruise control, you know, all those things. And even on the lower trims, you get, you know, adaptive cruise, and, you know, all the more basic stuff there is standard as well. So, you know, really great that they do have you covered very well as far as all that safety technology goes. Now, as far as fuel economy here in the Explorer ST, you're going to be getting 18 mpg in the city, 25 on the highway, and 20 combined. Now, in my, again, over 500 miles of just regular highway driving with BlueCruise on, these were 70-mile-per-hour highway speed limits, you know, so a little bit of a higher speed, but I was averaging about 23.5 mpg. Obviously, you know, I would have liked to see closer to 25. You know, so just know that at least on higher speed highways, you know, you're not going to probably hit the 25, at least in my experience. But, you know, still 23.5, you know, for this much horsepower, this big of a vehicle, I'm not going to complain. It's totally fine. And, you know, that average has dropped a little bit here with my around town kind of driving and all that. So now we're sitting just under 23. But, you know, again, I think that's still pretty decent. We'll see. I know some people are getting as low as like 16 mpg and just strictly, you know, around town kind of driving. So just, you know, obviously your mileage will vary. It comes down to how you drive, where you drive, all that. It is worth noting, though, that two of the options in this segment that you can get if you do care about fuel economy, again, Toyota Grand Highlander Hybrid Max is going to give you some fuel economy, actually on the highway about the same as this, but, you know, around town, the city stuff with the hybridization, that's where you're going to potentially get some better fuel economy in that Toyota. Also, the Mazda CX-90, there's also a plug-in hybrid version, which does a little bit less horsepower, but it's still 340 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque in that. And that's a plug-in hybrid that's going to be doing, about 30 miles of electric range. So real electric range, and then turns into a hybrid after that. Now that just uses a regular naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, so not, quite as punchy there compared to this, but again, you get that extra efficiency and that electrification for that instant response, but you also still end up getting, very comparable power and performance to this, so just be aware of those two. Now, the last thing to mention here is the pricing and how it compares to the competition. So Explorers in general start at right around $42,000. It goes up to $56,000 or so for the ST version here, and then this one again with the $5,000 black roof, the $3,000 sun and sound package and all that, balloons this one to just under $67,000. So at that price point, it is, pricey. And again, this is why I argued earlier, I'd rather probably have the Platinum, give you even softer rides, still probably totally fine handling, a more plush interior. At that, again, those were actually about $66,000 and comparably equipped, and I would just rather have that. And also, again, though, you don't need the black roof, so you save yourself $5,000 there, knock that off, you're talking 62 or so. That, makes this more competitive, but you still have a slight price premium compared with the others. But if you are looking for the best deal on an Explorer, you're definitely going to head over to mattmotoring.com. There you'll get access to dealer invoice pricing on that new car quotes page, as well as getting connected to a local dealer where you can, test drive one of these for yourself and see what you think about the Explorer ST. So there's going to be a link in the description, as well as one in a pinned comment for take you straight to that site and get you that information. But as far as the competitors here, so I think one of the most compelling ones, again, if you are someone who's of the sportier persuasion here, is going to be the Durango RT. Now, that is less horsepower, from that 5.7 liter V8. And unfortunately for 2025, we have no regular SRT version of these with the 6.4 liter motor. That has been dropped from the lineup here, so it's just 5.7. And so I think that has about 360 horsepower. But you get the V8 sound, and the Durango's obviously, again, lots of aftermarket stuff there you can do. Great CF 8-speed automatic, but it is an older interior. That Durango is very dated at this point. Smaller, tighter third row. Not as nice of a vehicle, I would say. So, but those do come in. I think you can get one of those, again, comparably equipped to this for about $57,000. So, you do save yourself a few $1,000s, and that's assuming we're paying MSRP for all these. I'd say you'll probably get a bigger discount on a Durango than you will on a brand new refreshed Explorer. Again, your deal will vary. I have to judge these based off MSRP just to be fair. But reality is there might be a significant price gap between this and Durango RT that might be worth considering, especially because you get that V8. And for some people, that might be more important than the bigger screen and the hands-free stuff and all that. So it comes down to, again, your personal preference. Now, as far as the other competitors moving on here, so that Mazda CX-90 Turbo S is a really compelling one. Again, you have a turbo 6-cylinder just like this. You have, again, less horsepower, 360 horsepower in that, 369 pound-feet of torque, but, very similar kind of acceleration. It's very smooth, very luxurious. I'd argue, more luxurious than this. Now, it doesn't have a sporty focus. There isn't any sporty trim, but it's sporty enough that, again, I had no complaints. Handling was phenomenal, better than this in my opinion. And those do come in just slightly under $60,000, fully loaded up with, again, ventilated second row seats, Napa leather, and, you don't get massage in that. And again, no hands-free in the Mazda. So massage and hands-free could honestly be two very luxurious things that, you miss out on the Mazda, even though that interior is nicer in other ways. So again, comes down to what your priorities are. But it's just worth noting that Mazda is, a very compelling choice in my opinion for, again, a couple $1,000s less. And I really enjoyed my week with that. And again, it's nice you have the plug-in hybrid option with similar performance if that's something you're interested in as well. And then the last main competitor I really think in this segment is going to be that Toyota Grand Highlander Hybrid Max. That does over 360 horsepower as well, and it's electrified, so it gives you really instant response. I've really enjoyed how I put my foot down in that thing, and it is immediate, and it takes off like a jet. I mean, that thing really has a lot of punch, really gutsy with that motor. Just a 2.4 liter turbo 4, but with that hybridization added on, I mean, that thing, it moves very nicely. And so, if you're just, again, looking for a smooth, soft, good family cruiser with a bunch of power, that could really give you, that same payoff, also again potentially giving you better fuel economy and also more space. Again, bigger third row, bigger cargo area in the trunk area there. The same kind of screen size, and even I think a little bit more storage space up front. You have Toyota reliability and resale value, which are always very compelling. And those, a fully loaded Hybrid Max Platinum with, again, ventilated seats in the back of that one as well. Everything else, being super nice. It actually has suede inserts there for that Platinum as well. You can get just full leather in the Limited too. But those are $60,700 exactly. And I mean, the only thing is the Toyota doesn't have this great sounding 6-cylinder. So that is the one thing that you're going to miss out on with the Toyota. But, again, same price, same money, basically. And, another just very nice one to consider. Again, handling is not nearly as good as this. Again, this isn't amazing, but I'd say this certainly does handle a little bit better, a little bit flatter and sportier, a little stiffer, though. But if that's what you're looking for, this is, again, really nice. And like I said, the Grand Highlander only does hands-free, under 25 miles per hour. It's like their traffic jam assist, really, and doesn't do, any of this longer highway, kind of high-speed stuff. So again, I think BlueCruise is really tempting, and that's why if I was shopping in this segment and I did a lot of highway driving, I would pick the Explorer. It would be hands down my pick. I think, Durango, it's fun to have the V8, but just such an older vehicle. Again, unless you get a huge discount on that, which might be possible, but Durango just, isn't quite as exciting to me as the others in this segment these days. Again, I really like Grand Highlander. If you need the most space, that's the one to go with. The Mazda is a really nice happy medium. If you're not, caring about the hands-free thing or the massage, and would be probably my top pick without those two things. But I do very much appreciate massages, especially on long drives. And having the BlueCruise, again, is certainly nice. And it is also worth noting that BlueCruise can get updated, I believe. So it's 1.2 now. Hopefully with software updates, it would get the newer versions of that, at least up to 1.4. And so hopefully that will improve over time too. And so for that reason, I think Explorer would be my pick in this kind of a segment if you're interested in a bunch of power. I still think I would go for Platinum, get the extra punch, get the softer ride, the nicer interior, and all the same great, BlueCruise, massage, all that stuff. I think that would probably be the play for me, but I'm really impressed with the Explorer. I didn't expect to come into this, review and end up coming out of it, liking this better than the Mazda, and even the Grand Highlander, but if this fits, all those priorities and everything fits with what you're looking for, yeah, I think Explorer probably would be my pick. It'd be probably a tie between this and the CX-90 because I do really love that too. But yeah, it's so nice to go hands-free on the highway. And the difference between having your hands up here and having your hands down here resting on your lap, it really does allow you to go more miles with less fatigue, and is definitely a really nice experience. And so for that reason, I think, Explorer is one of the ones to beat here in the segment, and probably one of my favorites in this segment. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the Explorer ST. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Ford for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. And yeah, thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.